That's what I'm getting AT&T.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to tonight's meeting of the Yountville Town Council. Let the record reflect it is Tuesday, September 15th at 6:02 p.m. For those of you joining us for the very first time in council chambers this evening, you'll find the agenda and supporting documentation in the little plastic bins on the wall by the door where you came in. Help yourself to that information. We are being broadcast live on Channel 28, and this session will be rebroadcast on Channel 28 Friday at noon. And we are also or live web streaming. You can go to www.townofyountville.com and click on Town Council, and watch us live or watch us at a later date. Would you all please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Mayor.
Thank you. May we have the roll?
Councilmember Dutton.
Here.
Councilmember Chilton.
Here.
Councilmember Mueller.
Here.
Vice Mayor Dunbar.
Here.
Mayor Sosserman.
Here. There is no closed session report. Number 5, adoption of the tonight's agenda. Are there any changes or corrections to tonight's agenda?
Yes, Mayor. Staff would respectfully like to request that you pull item 7C from the consent calendar. We provided you with an expanded staff report. We apologize, but we realize we did not do a good job of tracking the changes in the proposals, so that I want to thank the town clerk. She's put together a little outline that will show you the current language and the proposed outcome so that we can further discuss that for you.
Good. Any other changes, corrections? All righty. Can I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Seconded.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? None. That motion carries as amended. Item 6, public comment. Anyone wishing to speak to the council on any matter that's not on tonight's agenda? Anyone? Public comment? Okay, seeing none, I'll close the public comment. Item 7, approval of consent calendar. Are there any changes or corrections other than the pulling of item 7C from the consent calendar this evening?
Could we also pull D and get some more clarification on that report?
All righty, we're going to pull item 7D. Anything else?
I'll move to approve item 7A, B, and E.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? None. That motion carries, and I will let the record reflect I'll abstain from voting on the minutes since I did not attend either of those meetings. Item 7D, Councilmember Mueller.
I just had some questions of, for clarification. Get to that one. I didn't quite understand. Maybe staff could help explain to me. I noticed that there were some optional tasks. Are those not part of the 125,000?
The best way to explain this is that what staff is working with NCTPA on is a funding agreement to fund those tasks that are necessary to get to the point that the project will be eligible for federal stimulus reimbursement. So there are some optional tasks that we anticipate the project will require. What we're trying to do is focus those so that they will occur, that level of work will occur at that point, minimizing NCTPA's use of the, or I should say, minimizing the impact on the 125 or the potential impact on the town.
So these optional tasks would be outside of that design money? That's what the 125 is for?
The upfront. And what has happened here is, as you may recall, when we were originally moving forward, there was preliminary approval on the higher-ups to approve our design-build approach. And then they pulled that. And what that means is, under federal stimulus funding, they do not pay for a certain level of design authorization that has to be done prior to the grant. There are a level of design work. For example, if the design team needs to come out and modify, make some recommendations at a certain point in the permit, or do field review, or there's change order or RFIs, which are requests for information from the contractor, those types of expenses potentially are reimbursable, and that would occur hopefully through the grant and not through the $125,000. What NCTPA has advanced, and I should echo that we're very appreciative of the Executive Director, Paul Price, and his team, and their willingness to come forward when recognizing that when we were advised of the grant and where we were at, and then when Caltrans came up with some different structures, we had not anticipated nor budgeted $125,000 for further design. So the real effort on this is that this money will go towards project design, planning, environmental clearance, and the RFP preparation to get to the point where we can award the construction contract.
Okay, so then one last question. So NCTPA is going to give us $125,000. We'll be able to get ready to get the funds from, I forget the acronym, ATT.
AARA.
AARA, thank you. Then, once we get those funds, we will give back the $125,000?
No, and I think that's a great opportunity to clarify. NCTPA is having to advance this out of their own funding because this particular design is not reimbursable by federal stimulus funding.
So that's very good news for us.
Well, I think it is, because I think there's a recognition on the part of NCTPA through their Metropolitan Transportation Commission funding that, we entered into good faith going down this path, and there was a change, and that was going to cost us money that we hadn't anticipated, and that's why I say I'm very appreciative of how NCTPA, Napa County Transportation and Planning Agency, has worked in partnership with the town. Otherwise, the consequence there would have been two potential other consequences. One, the town stops and does not accept the grant, and we wait till a later date to fund the project, or we have to completely come up with $125,000 or so at this point in time to move the project forward. So this is, I think, a very positive outcome and a good regional partnership.
Thanks.
More questions? Vice Mayor?
Since this item was pulled, I actually I had a question that was previously answered by staff that I'll just mention. My question had to do with pound management and whether, because of the delays with our initial plan on how we were going to move forward with the design and construction, I just wanted to clarify that there wasn't an exposure to having pound management already kind of on the clock with the contract running, and that we were spinning our wheels with them and staff. And maybe, Steve, you want to clarify that, but staff.
Well, I think
explain that situation.
This will diminish some of their work. There is still work they're doing, and their contract is on a time and materials basis in support of our documentation and preparation of the RFP for that. But these expenses are eligible to be reimbursed by the $125,000. So we're looking at the engineering design team, planning consultant, and the construction management and consulting team.
Thank you.
Any more questions? Can I have a motion?
Move to approve consent item 7D.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? And that motion carries. Thank you. Item 8, presentations. We have none.
Let's see.
7C.
Oh, okay. Item 7C.
Let me start with an overview explanation, and then I will gently allow the town attorney and town clerk to augment the discussion. As you may remember, we've started on a process of updating our municipal code and also incorporating the existing design ordinance into it. Currently, our municipal code is not available online. We've produced some PDF versions, and the effort here is to update it, get it online, and as part of that code update process, the firm does an analysis as they're preparing to codify it, and I will point out that their analysis focuses on some things that are where their observation of the existing municipal ordinance is either in conflict with state law or some current practices that they would recommend. It's generally not a review of, do we want to clean up some of these ordinances. We have some very outdated language. We have some ambiguous language in some of our municipal code and ordinance, and we will, as a organization, start working on proposals for cleaning up some of those. The intent on a few of these recommendations were some what staff felt were minor or straightforward, and that's why we're proposing them, so that the code update company can incorporate those into the version that they're going to produce for us and deliver. And in the staff report, what we realized that we did is we gave you a completed of the ordinance to make those changes, but it did not allow for a comparison of what the prior was and what the proposed was. And also you'll note that there's a section called Quality Code Publishing Analysis Comments, and that section is designed to incorporate why we would, why they're recommending and staff is concurring with the recommendation. So the ordinance before you tonight allows you to, accept it in whole, or if there's an area that is of concern to the council, you could strike that. But, depending on the level you guys want to go through, we're prepared to answer questions if you have. But, a simple one, for example, is during the last time the towns updated the municipal code, this was a administrator position as opposed to town manager, so we've got town administrator sprinkled throughout 300 pages. So one of the simple changes is wherever you see town administrator, it's now town manager. Another one, for example, the next item under appeal to town council, the change that we're recommending is that the right to appeal will be deemed waived if not made within writing within 10 days of the date of the decision. And the reason for that is it's consistent with state law and also provides clarity on what the timeline is to make an appeal and what the consequences are. Section 4 of the recommendation is simply to reflect, our current code does not reflect the title and position of the Parks and Recreation Director. Section 5, what we're doing there is clearing up when there was a change to a directly elected mayor. There was also some structural changes made to the operation of the vice mayor, and the proposed language is designed to incorporate what the existing practice is. Also, another illustration would be under Section 7, Revenue and Finance. We're incorporating the recently approved Measure M language that was from the voter ordinance that does not exist in the municipal code because there was no Measure M prior. And then there's additional sections. Staff is happy to answer questions that you might have about either the changes or the basis for the change. And the town attorney, myself, and the town clerk are prepared to answer any questions that you might have.
Council have any questions on this issue?
I have several. When you're trying to make changes based on the First Amendment requirement, so this is something new that we need to be doing that's come up? And when you had a consultant go through this, these were kind of the only unique ones that they found that they had issue with?
I'll let the town attorney go into a little more detail, but in essence, what they were trying to do is their analysis, because they do this for a number of communities, and their footnote is the town may wish, on the event language that you're talking about, we can keep it in there, but enforcing it and using it exposes us to constitutional or to challenge because we're infringing on somebody else's rights. So their recommendation, and I will point out that this process we're using is several phases. This is just the first phase of what we would consider some very basic cleanup. And then our hope and our intent is that once we get the code all transferred, all cleaned up and put into the format, all put online so that people can access it, review it, then we will start going through in a similar format to what we're doing with the planning tool bag discussion, and we'll start identifying certain ordinances that council and the community and staff believe need updating, and we'll go through a very similar process, which will be what's the issue, what are we trying to resolve, what's the proposed recommendation for it, and then the ordinance process, as you may know and the public may not, so we'll take a little bit of time. It requires an ordinance to implement changes to the municipal code or to update or make a modification. And then there's a requirement also for a second reading. So typically the process is going to involve 3 council meetings, a council meeting discussing what the issue is and what the council might want to do, some staff recommendations, input from the public. The second meeting would be much like this particular meeting where we're outlining what the proposals are and recommendation. And I will also say that from this point forward on these things, the staff will use a very similar format where we'll be incorporating the existing and the proposed and providing some footnote and reason, perhaps similar to this. The format may change based on the content, and then there'll be a second reading. So that would be the process. All the other things that remain, there may be things that we have issues with. There may still be some conflict in the code, but this was their attempt at what really stands out and potentially exposes that, and I'll let the
Oh, no, that
town.
really wasn't my question. Maybe I can simplify. So I totally understand the reason that they did that, but my question is, this was the only chapter out of all 16 titles where they found any major conflict with the amendments of the Constitution.
The service went through all of the titles. There were numerous recommendations in their view that were evaluated by staff. Some of those are here, some of them were not yet incorporated, and that was either because in reviewing their recommendations, it was found that some of their recommendations were not actually based on California state code, that there were some questions about where their recommendation was coming from, but all of their recommendations were qualified by, we're not suggesting necessarily that this is the definitive legal opinion about your code. We're just saying you might want to look at this. So it happened to be that the changes that we chose to incorporate now before they start the codification process are ones that don't require a great deal of further legal analysis to determine how it would be appropriate to amend our code at this point. They were the simplest and most straightforward changes that we could adopt before they start the codification process. So that's how these particular sections were chosen, after staff went through all of the recommendations that the Codification Service recommended. And they were the simplest to accomplish and seemed to be of the most import, in particular related to those First Amendment issues that were, and they were issues of particular import that could be easily fixed by the fixes we have in this ordinance.
And just to add, for your areas of the municipal code, address section Title 1, 2, 3, 5, and 8 were the only sections of our code that they commented on. And of those sections, what Amy just said are the easier ones to handle, which were incorporated in this current proposed ordinance. All of the other sections did not receive comment. So currently, we have 16 chapters within
So they
the municipal
reviewed them,
code.
they just didn't have any comment?
That's
Okay,
right.
great.
That doesn't
All right,
necessarily mean things don't need to be changed
Right,
at this
okay,
point.
got it. All right, thanks.
Right, and I think based on staff's review of some of the comments they made, we agreed that because there were some inconsistencies in their recommendations with what we would agree was appropriate, that because we're not going through page by page at this point, that we would limit our changes to those that were the most important and easiest to make. And then, once it's codified, we can go through title and chapter by chapter much easier when everything is online and start the process that Steve mentioned.
Any more questions on this one?
I'll move for approval of consent calendar item 7C.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None. That motion carries. Thank you. Item 9, public hearing, tool bag item, design ordinance amendment to section 1C, IC4, walls, fences, and landscape screening, townwide. Do we have a staff report?
Yes, thank you. This is a tool bag, planning tool bag item that was heard and introduced to you at the September 1st meeting to add provisions for the extension of heights in certain circumstances for fences and walls and landscape screening. And the direction coming out of that meeting was to add some definitions for fence, wall, and landscape screen, and also to add a process that would, where the neighbor securing the adjacent property owners, the neighbor that is wanting the extension of the fence, upon securing permission from property owners, could go ahead by right to do the fence extension. If that permission is not secured, it would be a 30-day appeal process, similar to our usual notice of pending action procedure. So the direction of the council was to return with an ordinance, and that's what we have here, introducing ordinance 38009. And it adds the three definitions, and I'll read the definitions. For fence is any temporary or permanent construction of wood, metal, wire, stone, masonry, or other material created for the purpose of privacy protection, delineation, screening, enclosure, noise attenuation, or for aesthetic reasons, but excluding landscape screens. And the definition for wall, very similar to fence, a couple of differences there, though. Any permanent construction of wood, metal, stone, masonry, or other material, either alone or used in combination with building walls by attachment and created for the purpose of privacy protection, division, delineation, screening, enclosure, noise attenuation, or for aesthetic reasons, but excluding retaining walls and landscape screens. And landscape screen definition would be a boundary or barrier or plant material formed by a row or series of shrubs, bushes, or trees that are planted with the intent of forming a relatively dense hedge or screen to provide an area with privacy, enclosure, division, delineation, protection, or for aesthetics, or that prevent passage from between any combination of individual shrubs, bushes, or trees. Now, as you would notice here, the definition between fence and wall are fairly similar, and the essential distinction is that fences can be temporary in nature at construction sites, for instance, and sometimes composed of a wire material, where walls would not have that material, and walls would be considered more permanent constructions, and also they could be attached to the wall of a building to form a continuous barrier, where fences are usually freestanding on their own. The provisions that are added to accommodate the extension of height for the screening purposes are found in A through F here. This would be added as a 10th item to the existing ordinance that I provided a copy at your places tonight. So what we're doing is moving C4A down to be, and renumbering it C4B in this case, and the definitions would be C4A. The reason that is done is consistently throughout the design and zoning ordinance, where there are supplemental definitions provided, they are always in the A position. And so the design standards move to B, and these provisions A through F are added as a 10th item to the existing nine items in the design standards. One of the things that this falls back on as far as the codification effort of the municipal ordinance, including the design and zoning ordinance, is that for right now, these are placeholders, this numbering scheme. The entire ordinance may be renumbered and these would follow suit in that case later. So the provisions are essentially what was discussed at the September 1st meeting, and I'll go quickly through these. On A, that the extensions not exceed a total height of 8 feet, and it gives an example that's typically a fence with a 2-foot lattice screen at the top. B, heights are measured from approved finished grade and shall not be artificially built up for the purpose of increasing the screen height. The screen extensions are limited to locations within the rear and side yards. Yard setbacks. Screen extensions are not permitted in front yards, along yards and setbacks that front onto public or private streets, at properties where screen heights are limited by conditions of approval. An example here would be the pathways in Washington Park, by condition of approval, are limited to 4-foot fences on bordering those pathways. So this could not be used to increase and override a condition that exists already, specifically limiting a fence height. And for reverse corner lots within the front yard setback of the adjacent property where the maximum rear yard height of 6 feet shall not be exceeded. What this means is on a block, the lots line up fronting on the street. A reverse corner lot is the corner lot. It's facing the other street, the intersecting street. So its rear yard abuts the front yard for a portion of the lot to over its rear yard, which is its front yard. So for that portion that is the front yard setback for the other property, that cannot be brought up to 8 feet. It has to remain 6 feet. That was an addition and a little additional clarification that was added from the last discussion at your last meeting. D is screen extensions shall be administratively approved and permitted with no additional notification otherwise upon providing information to the adjoining property owner regarding the design, i.e. dimensions, materials, colors, and location of the extension, securing the written consent, and submitting it to the planning department. That provision was added, so we are assured that the property owner that is giving their consent has been informed of what's going up, the design of it. And then when written approval is secured, it may be approved outright. When it's not been secured, extensions may be approved at the conclusion of a 30-day review and appeal period following the posting and mailing of a notice of pending action for the extension request, and no appeals have been received, then it would be approved. It's a 30-day opportunity for anyone to appeal that pending action. The town council will hear the appeals on these. Planning staff shall approve the location, materials, and color of the extension construction. And this is just to give it one last look that we don't end up with something extraordinary that is atypical from what the expectation would be for these extensions. The extension material, other than landscape screens, typically hedges, which may grow to 8 feet, shall not be solid material and shall consist of a design that is a minimum of 35% open or vegetated growth material grown on an approved framework, green screen or wire. And then the last one was a little bit of a clarification. Walls and fences over 6 feet in height, and we added in masonry walls over 4 feet in height measured from the bottom of the footer, and that's right out of the building code, are required to secure a building permit, or as required by current building code. Should the code change, it's required to comply with whatever that change may be. So what we have here is, as I noted, these provisions are being added as a 10th item, and the definitions added as A, and we are recommending this be introduced, this ordinance 338009, and you waive the first reading.
Council have any questions for staff? Vice Mayor?
I do have a question. It's basically the same question I brought up previously, and it relates to landscape screening. And
my concern is that it's still not clear. The specific situation I worry about is a row of trees that is basically used as an elevated screen. I don't see the wording here that it really fits into, by this definition, for example, Italian cypress would be a common tree that I've seen anyway, used as a living wall, really. This doesn't really address, according to this, you could not plant that type of a tree one right after the other to create a row that basically blocks, it becomes a solid screen or wall. I know it exists in town, though. So do we need to try to do anything with the wording, or is that handled on a in the landscape section?
Well, in the definition, I did contemplate that and try to address it by adding the language that it is intended to be a continuous permanent barrier, and then that last provision that prevents passage from between any combination of individual shrubs, bushes, or trees. If they're grown so compactly and densely that prevents passage, then it would be, I would say, I would interpret that as the intent as to be a barrier and a screen.
So if that condition exists and the neighbor is fine with it, and so that condition exists, the neighbor moves, a new neighbor comes in, that condition is there, they don't like it. What do we do about that?
Well, that's kind of with everything, even a fence that's been extended to 2 feet, it's, you're buying into a situation that exists that the prior owner consented to, and if that's unacceptable, then I suppose.
But if that accepted condition is non-compliant, does that person have any recourse, or not, because it's a pre-existing condition, compliant or not?
You mean it was done in non-compliance to this ordinance, then it would be a violation of it in an enforcement action.
Okay. That's fine.
Councilmember Chilton.
My only question has to do with your explanation of the reverse corner lots. I think there are a couple of those across the street from my house. Is the term reverse corner lots universally understood that it does not need a definition? I think a layperson would not understand what that is, but is that something that would be clear in planning?
It is in planning, yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Any more questions? Anyone from the public wishing to comment on this matter this evening? All right, seeing none, I'll close the public comment, bring it back to council for further discussion, decision. Is there any more discussion on this? I think you did a nice job.
My only comment is I think new section C4B 10D. I think, Bob, you did a very good job of incorporating council comment from last one to not come up with a overly cumbersome process, but a fairly clear one that I think will be fair and certainly addresses the comments that Councilmember Dutton particularly made. So that I think that's really an improvement.
Anyone want to introduce the ordinance?
I'll move that we introduce ordinance 380-09, excuse me, an ordinance of the Town Council of the Town of Yountville amending section 1C4, walls, fences, and landscape screening of the design ordinance to add definitions and provisions for increasing the maximum height of screening and waive the reading.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None, that motion carries. Great, thank you. Item 10, Yountville Park Playground Equipment, follow-up from the September 1, 2009 Town Council meeting. Do we have a staff report?
Yes, you do. At the council meeting of September 1st, I presented to council the children's voting results for the Yountville playground equipment. At the meeting, council indicated its support for option 4, the Challenger piece, the children's first choice, and the Play Web, the children's second choice, and discussed options for funding the project. Council discussed funding efforts to cover the projected funding shortfall and the possibility of dipping into the town's reserve funds. Council directed staff to get updated cost estimates for each phase of the project. There is an existing budget allocation of $50,000 for the Yountville Park improvements. These funds would cover electrical improvements, playground area concrete border, and barking surfacing. Estimated cost of improvements is $39,380, leaving a balance of $10,620 to be applied to the removal of the Vineyard Park playground equipment and reinstallation of the equipment to Yountville Park, or towards the purchase of new playground equipment for Yountville Park. The following estimates were obtained. At Yountville Park, to take apart the galvanized blue swing and to make into one bay, remove the tire swing and install next to the single bay. To remove the compan equipment from the Vineyard Park and then reinstall the pieces at Yountville Park. And to then repair the poured plate and surface and where the equipment was removed, and include filling for the hole, base rock, and compact, came to a total cost of $6,710.50. The second estimate was the purchase and installation of option 4, which was a Challenger custom design playground structure at Yountville Park. The estimate came in at $31,292. Estimate number 3 was the purchase and installation of the small play web at Yountville Park. Cost came in at $19,492. Estimate number 4 was the purchase and installation of the medium play web at Yountville Park in lieu of the small play web. And this was due to the fact that this play web is currently on sale right now. Cost came in at $19,031. Option number 5, or estimate number 5, excuse me, was the purchase and installation of both the Challenger playground structure and the small play web. Cost came to $50,784. And then estimate number 6 was the purchase and installation of a special that they have running. These prices are good till October the 15th. This quote included the Challenger unit, the medium play web, and a free item, which is either a springmate, which a springmate is an animal piece with a spring attached to the bottom. This way the kids can move back and forth on it or up and down. A piece of equipment called a toss-up, which is a pole with a bucket on the top with holes in it, and the kids can throw balls up into the bucket and then they will proceed to fall out through the holes. Or a park bench, which would be a 6-foot metal park bench. Each of these items is valued at $949. And then to complete the Vineyard Park removal and reinstallation of the playground equipment at Yountville Park, and then repair all the surfacing at the Vineyard Park. That cost came to $54,304. If the special is purchased, the town would receive the Challenger piece, the medium play web, and the free piece of equipment, and a savings of $6,800 would be saved. Purchasing of each playground structure separately costs more in freight. And in regards to installation, if all the playground structures are installed at the same time and the Vineyard Park equipment is moved and reinstalled at Yountville Park, there would be a savings of $2,250 in installation costs. These estimates are good for approximately 90 days unless otherwise noted. And in the staff report, there was a breakdown of a quotation from NSP3 in regards to all the different quotes I have just mentioned. And then the second is the installation breakdown from the installation company in regards to the Vineyard Park installation, as well as the separate pieces of the playground structures. Does council have any questions?
Councilmember Chilton, any questions?
Yeah, just a couple of quick questions. On your item number 1, I think this came up in the discussion with somebody in the public. They asked what was going to happen with Vineyard Park, what would be there. And I'm not sure the right answer was given, but my impression is that that rubber surface that's there will remain. It's just they'll be patched where it's taken out.
Correct. They will, the footings that the playground equipment are in, they will be pulled up, and then they will patch those and smooth those surfaces out, so there will not be any type of hazard.
Okay, it'll be empty, but it'll have that surface.
Correct.
Okay. And then I was at the very, very end. Maybe you could back up a little bit in your couple of your numbers. You mentioned a savings of $2,250 to install kind of everything under one purchase order, which I see fairly clearly. You also mentioned about $6,800. Was that for purchasing all the equipment together?
When you look
that-
at the estimate of the Playgrounds Unlimited quote, and you add up all the totals of the commercial playground installation, item number 1, installation of Challenger and installation of Medium Playweb, that actually comes to the $16,677. That's because if it's broken down and we do piece at a time. If we do option 4 that they list, if all work is done under one purchase order, then it comes to $14,427. We'd be saving a total of $2,225 to do everything all at one time, so the company doesn't have to continually come out and do each piece at a separate time.
Okay. Was there an additional savings number that I thought you said that had to do with buying all the equipment at one time?
Yes, if on the first quote, if we purchase the Challenger custom design unit and the Medium Playweb that is currently on sale right now, there's a $6,800 savings.
That's what I thought, okay. I just wanted to make sure that was, I could add those two together based on what you said, not, they weren't included in each other.
Correct.
Okay, that's the only questions I have, thank you.
Good. Any more questions for staff?
I do want to offer one qualification to Councilmember Chilton's question about the Vineyard Park situation. And the recommendation was that the surfacing made sense to keep because a number of adults could use it sort of as a yoga mat exercise stretching. So I just wanted to make sure everybody understood that there was a logic to the fact that that surface was going to be kept that way and could be utilized that way, although it might look a little odd without some explanation.
Also, that matting surface is very expensive surfacing, and if we could afford it in other parks, I'm sure we would, but it's good to keep intact.
Vice Mayor?
So is it correct to say your specific recommendation is option 6 to do
Actually-
the package?
Actually, if I may, I'd like to have Lisa, I'd like to have you thank Lisa for her presentation. This is a policy discussion for the council, and there is not a specific staff recommendation. What I want to point out is that our budget authorization, which Lisa's alluded to, we do have because we've been effective in achieving some cost savings on the electrical project and the concrete. We have, as was alluded to you, approximately a $10,000 balance within the current fiscal year that would allow us to do the existing relocation of the Vineyard equipment within budget authorization. Any of the other recommendations that require an expenditure beyond $10,000 are going to require council direction to staff on how you would like to proceed. When we adopted the budget, the council also adopted a platform that was very clear to the staff in terms of the direction for our financial management this year. So the reason I really think you all need to discuss, there are a lot of good alternatives for you, and really the question from a policy standpoint is, does the council want to do all of the activities at one time? There may be a logic to support that. If so, you're going to need to provide a budget direction and authorization for us to utilize reserves. There's the combination where you may choose to use some reserves and challenge the community to fundraise for a portion, or you have the option to do none of it. So that's why at this point there is no specific staff recommendation as to which of those policy directions you'd wish to provide us.
So if I may, then I'll ask you this follow-up question. If I understand it correctly, we have $50,000 already budgeted that would not require a policy change.
You have $50,000 in park
improvements,
expenditures, of which there's $10,000 remaining because the initial project priorities based on the council's adopted budget included the electrical system enhancements and upgrades and the new concrete curbing and the playground fill material. Those expenditures total $39,000 in pocket change, therefore resulting in a balance of $10,000 because we've had savings that we could apply to playground equipment. Otherwise, there would be no existing budget this year to apply to playground equipment.
The only purchase in this whole package that's within the remaining would be to do step one.
Correct. You could do step one within the current fiscal authorization, no questions asked. That, you know, you could tell us proceed with that, and we issue the PO tomorrow, and it's taken care of.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. Council have any comments?
That's public.
Yeah. Is there anyone from the public wishing to comment on this matter this evening? Anyone? Seeing none, I'll bring it back to council for further discussion, comments. How do you wish to proceed? Councilmember Mueller?
My comments are that we just finished the budget a few months ago. We had an extensive discussion about our capital improvement projects, and this was certainly one, along with streetlights, and we just did not get a consensus for either one of those items, plus there were other discussions, and that was kind of done to balance the budget. I think that at this time, I'm only comfortable with doing item one because it does fall within our $10,620 extras monies that we have. I think that, you know, winter's coming up, and there probably won't be a lot of playing because it'll be raining. So by the time we get around to a lot of the kids wanting to come out in the spring, it'll be budget time again. And I'm very happy to make this extra playground equipment, if the fundraising doesn't occur or doesn't get enough money, to make it a major priority that that would come out of our capital improvement budget, you know, starting next June, July when we do that. I'm also willing to, if we have any of the $10,000 left after we do item one, to donate that to the fundraising cause, save it for next year's funding, however that kind of works out. But I don't think we can do this next year. We just were not able to, when we extensively went through the budget, approve it. So those are my comments.
Councilmember Chilton?
Well, a couple of things are important here to me, one of which is that the equipment that was taken out was heavily used by the community. So it's concerned me that we've gone an entire summer essentially not had that. I think actually we'll even go many more months where it is quite in use, except for when it rains on the weekends. So I think it should be, and I've always thought it should be a high priority for the town to replace that. I think if we thought about some other major heavily used items in town that were suddenly made unavailable, that we would take the kind of action that would replace that for the citizens. So I've always believed that this should be a priority. The other thing that makes me believe that we should do this now is the fact that by passing up the combination of all these together, we are costing ourselves at least $9,000, maybe more if the price goes up in the future. Right now, if I do the math correctly, we've got about a $43,000 unbudgeted shortfall. The cost of not doing everything right now is an additional $9,000, which is basically adding on another $9,000 to what we don't have budgeted. So one of my original thoughts was the fundraising, and I really believe that right now with the current economic situation, and I think of that specifically when it comes to the school, a lot of people's focus in this town right now has to do with Yountville School, has to do with making some of the fundraisers happen for that school pretty high. And I think those are the people who would be more involved in normal times for fundraising. So I've kind of changed my mind over time in talking to some people. I believe it's a reasonable use of our capital projects fund right now, and Kathleen, correct me if I'm wrong, the capital projects fund is projected at the end of the year to be a little over $1.6 million. Is that correct?
Actually, it's closer to 2.
2? I must have a not updated budget. So $2 million. I just found $300,000.
We had some savings in various areas.
Okay. So I think that in the whole scale of things, we're talking about 1%, 2% maybe of the 2% of the capital projects fund. I think the council should use that. I think we should make a budget adjustment. And if we don't do it now, that will be empty for in another entire year because the budget cycle won't start until July 1st of next year at the earliest. So I personally support making a budget adjustment for the approximately $44,000 costs, taking that out of the capital projects fund, and let's just get it done.
Councilmember Dutton, any comments?
No, I would just really reiterate what I said the last meeting, essentially what Councilmember Chilton just said. I think it should get done sooner rather than later and get it over with. I think the only options we really have are 1 and 4. I don't feel any fundraising efforts, 1, would never get organized, and 2, probably would fall considerably short of what we have to do. So I would be in favor of just getting it done now and make the adjustments as necessary.
Good, thank you. Vice Mayor?
Well, I would want, first of all, a little bit more clarification on what exactly we're saying about getting done. If we're talking about getting done the entire item 6, which is the 54,000 and change, so that we're talking about a 40,000 plus budget adjustment. I'm going to base my comments with that assumption. And I think
That's what I'm saying.
That's correct. That's what I was assuming.
so. One of Councilmember Moeller's comments I brought up at the last meeting because there was a concern about the time of year and how much time are we talking about here for this outdoor play season. And staff made it quite clear that they felt like there was quite a bit of play season left. And that factors into a little bit because my first thought was, why can't we wait until spring? But I do think that we are probably talking about a fairly lengthy period of time where it would still be usable. And I understand the point about this not being a budget priority a few months ago, but I also think circumstances have changed where we have a major park that's offline for children. It wasn't the case when we were making that a priority. Whether the $9,000 that we're saving or not is accurate, it's hard to say if if this sale is going to get better or get worse. We're guessing whether, we can sit here and talk all night long about whether the market, the prices are going to go up or down. But I do think that the planning that the staff has done to consolidate and make this the one really viable family playground area, I think is a very good philosophy. And I agree. Councilmember Dutton made a very good point about this, that these things have a way of lingering on and on and on if we don't address them. So I would be willing to adjust the budget for that 44,000 or approximately in order to make sure that we do get back online and have something available for the families to. And this is coming from somebody who doesn't have children, so you can't accuse me of being too selfish about this, but I certainly see that there's a need that's being not met right now for the community.
And I would tend to agree. I mean, I drive by the park from time to time, and every time I go by, even during the winter months, there are a lot of families there with children, and they play all year round in that park. And you'd be surprised how many people really depend on that and spend a lot of time there. So, this is something for the community. It's something that we have to think about when we make decisions in terms of budget adjustments. And it's something that we can manage. And like Councilmember Chilton said, I don't think it would be too difficult to find the $44,000. And as far as fundraising by the community, as much as I would like to see them take ownership and be a part of this, maybe we can put that towards something else, or some changing out some equipment in other parks or other areas next summer. So I would support option 6. Where is it? Oh, yeah, option 6. So you need a motion? You need direction.
We need direction, and I think it would be appropriate that there's some type of minute order direction. I also just want to remind you, and then just to make sure that in your discussions, you know, the park, you have two significant pieces of equipment you're talking about in addition. So one of your alternatives, you know, could be the larger piece of equipment. I just want to make sure that, I see the heads nodding, but I want to make sure that there are some different options that you're evaluating. So as you move forward with your direction, I think what we would want is to confirm what the selection is. Second would be to direct staff to bring back at your next council meeting a budget amendment transferring the funds from the reserve to the, I should say, the capital project fund reserve, to be specific, not the general fund reserve. And then the third item would be to direct staff to implement purchase orders to begin this so that we move forward with a timeline if that's the direction that you wish to go forward with.
Well, it looks like option 6 includes the Challenger unit, medium play web, and a free item of our choice. So we need to determine what that free item is, for starters.
Mayor, I would just suggest, if it's to the council's liking, that we leave that up to our very experienced staff to make that decision.
I agree.
Don't go with the springy thing. Those are dangerous. They'll throw you every time.
I say, don't go with the balls.
Well, I like the ball thing.
I like the spring thing.
That's why I thought it might be a good idea to leave it up to staff.
Okay, well, the council can't decide on the freebie, so
You got it covered? All right. I'll make a, do you know what a motion?
I think option 6 covers everything.
No, because again, the direction would need to be option 6 would be your first action. The second part would be to direct staff to bring back a budget amendment, which would include a
Correct.
transfer for the fund balance of approximately $44,000. We'll get the exact, and that would come out of the unallocated capital projects fund reserve. And then the third item would be to proceed with issuing the purchase orders for the activities necessary for item 6.
That's right.
So moved, as the town manager just explained.
And I have it down.
Second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
Thank you. That motion carries. Item 11, appoint AB 32 Implementation Council Ad Hoc Committee. Do we have a staff report?
A brief one. As we have briefly started discussing this, as you know, and following some of the league information and some of the earlier discussions, this is a changing area. Greenhouse gas emissions, the efforts that are going to occur at the municipal level, policy decisions and directions, and we briefly talked about it, I believe, 2 council meetings ago, about establishing a council ad hoc committee to work with staff to better help us participate, evaluate, and look at the various things, because long term, we're going to be needing to look at potential ordinances that may involve things like recycling, changes in behavior, policy, not only involving town, for example, energy conservation, recycling, education, promotion, things like that. And there could be more substantial items, potential building code modifications. And our thought was, initially right now, we need to work on focusing on adoption of town baselines and town targets. And we feel that it would be helpful to have a council ad hoc committee to be kind of working with us to evaluate and provide some input as we're bringing forward some of those items. We would anticipate initially that the council members will work with us on strategies and action plans in support of AB 32. And when I say in support of AB 32, I don't mean we're supporting the bill, but in support of the town's efforts to comply with AB 32, which we need to do. So initially, off the get-go, we would anticipate reviewing current data used to determine our 2005 CO2 equivalent units, to establish baseline values to comply with the AB 32 mandate, and to establish our appropriate target reduction goals. And that's a fairly significant bit of work in its own right there. Provide assistance in preparing target action recommendations to reduce our CO2 equivalent units in future years. And that's going to be where we start talking about what are the action steps. Those could be education, it could be conservation practices, various other elements. Thirdly, review, evaluate, and make recommendations for implementation strategies and action plans appropriate for the town of Yountville. And that's focusing more on our own organizational activities that are how our business practices are to what we do. And fourthly, is to participate in League, ABEG, and other regional planning workshops, and I apologize, there's a typo, and meetings related to AB 32 compliance as appropriate. And I'll also mention Senate Bill 375 is floating out around there. So part of this is recognizing that here we're talking about being a regional partner and a regional player. There's things that are going on around us that we need to be aware of and participate in, and in some cases, where it's appropriate, having the elected officials participate and provide some focus and direction we believe would be helpful. That's your staff report.
Any questions? Anyone from the public have a comment? All right, council, anybody interested?
I'll help.
I'd be willing to volunteer. I'm going to be involved with the league as second vice president anyway. I'm sure we're going to be covering these issues, so happy
Good.
to.
There's your committee. I move we appoint Vice Mayor Dunbar and Councilmember Moeller to your ad hoc committee to conform to the requirements of AB 32.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None. That motion carries. Great. Thank you. Staff informational reports.
Briefly, one that I want to share with you, because this is owner supplied. In your packet, there is an informational item on the acquisition of furnishings under item 12A, Community Center Furniture. This is just a highlight for you, some of the activities. Staff has been working very diligently, and about 95% of all of our furniture purchases, one, we're using GSA or CMAS pricing, which is state and government purchasing, and in accordance with the town's purchasing ordinance, we're allowed to move forward on that. But more importantly, we just wanted to give you an update to let you know that this next step, because it's a good chunk of change, about $95,000, but it's also the stuff that's necessary, tables, chairs, office furnishings, things like that to fully implement. And you'll see a breakout. We're furnishing the library reading room. We're furnishing the community hall, community boardroom, the community center teen room, office, lobby, the reading room, the art room, and the activity room. And I would also point out, just so people have a little bit of a magnitude of what we're talking about in some areas, most significant cost item is not staff room furnishings and things like that. It's purchasing seating for 400 and tables and things that can be used in the activity room. Over half of the budget's going there. And then in the material, you'll see a breakout of where the budget's going. For example, community center offices are $4,000 in furnishings. The activity room is $42,000, and that's just there for you.
You talking about the multi-purpose room?
Multi-use.
Multi-purpose activity room, correct.
I hadn't heard that one before. That's
Do we have storage for all this stuff, Steve?
Yes. One of the nice advantages of the new facility is that there is a large central storage facility adjacent to the multi-purpose room where a majority of that item will go, especially the tables and chairs, and that's why they're on dollies and rolling. I will point out, though, that this does not replace the existing community hall. But those furnishing items still remain as they are, although I think going forward, as we put together our annual replacement budgets, we will attempt to replace them consistent with the new. So, going forward, there's there, But the community boardroom will have furnishing. It will also have a whiteboard so that groups can do, meetings, and that will accommodate approximately 14 to 16 people. And the breakout of the furniture will allow it to be more modern so that if it's two cluster groups, and instead of having what I would call big inappropriate furniture like we have here, that these two tables here that make it really hard to use, these are the new modular stuff that can all be put together to make a large boardroom, or could be broken down to have individual tables for different presentation and group use. So we put a lot of thought into the furnishings in terms of how to make them appropriate for the anticipated uses. For example, the art room is designed to accommodate both adults and children. So if you can imagine, we have tables that adjust based on height for project, and we also have chairs that will fit an adult and will fit somebody that's, say, 8 to 10, because one chair does not fit all.
Steve, did you look at maybe an upgrade to these whiteboards? I mean, if we're possibly going to be able to rent out, the boardroom for activities, these,
I'm very pleased.
Upgrading a whiteboard is something we can plug a computer into. It's a little more electronic. I would love to see
This
that.
particular one is, I think you're going to be pleased with it. It's actually the type of a whiteboard that you open and it can present for presentations in the room. The electronics in that, because of the space, are small, but I will point out that the staff has really took to heart council's direction on making sure, and we've also had, I should think, the attention and direction from the ad hoc committee. The furnishings and things that we're putting in here are equivalent with the facility, and we are probably, I would say, in general, an upgrade over what was the prior level of equipment found in the community center. So,
But even some of those newer whiteboards, I'm sure all of us at some of our other board meetings see what the rest of Napa County has out there, and, something that you can actually plug your computer into there and touch the screen, and it'll...
That we have not purchased. I know now exactly what you're saying. That is something I think we could look at for a potential upgrade. That's a fairly expensive little piece, but I think from that standpoint, now knowing exactly what you're referencing there, that is something we can look at. And
I think in the end, we might get our money back for something like that with renting out that. I don't know what their cost.
What I think we can do is, as we move forward, one of the things that I will point out is the budget that we put in, because the council was very concerned, is we didn't add a lot of bells and whistles. You asked us to come in with a very basic operational component, and I think what we're trying to do is, as we come forward, there may be some enhancements when we get into the building, and we may look at putting some budget money next year towards some of those when we have a better idea, and we can certainly go out and price. I think what you're referring to is one of those media boards where somebody can go up and they're marking things, and you hit a button, and whatever you were marking gets scanned in, and as far as presentation. So that's certainly something I certainly would enjoy the opportunity to use when we're doing our council strategic planning and our staff meetings and workshops. And I do think, our intent is to make that space available for community groups to use. I will point out that the community boardroom is, like I say, it seats about 14 to 16, so it's really more a working boardroom meeting than it is a presentation. But I think that's the spirit that we're trying to do. We're also looking at enhanced AV, and we will begin. You will see at your next council meeting an overview of the business plan and some of the operational ideas that they're having for the community center. So I think your ideas are right on target, and I think we just need to start looking at what will potentially be some of those enhancements, and maybe doing some refinement with user groups. In that spirit, we are actually holding a familiarization tour next week with the town's lodging, restaurant, and business community so that they can understand what the center is going to look like, operate, so that as they're booking business, they can understand that this is a operation that they may want to be able to use in terms of if they're bringing groups that need off-site meeting space or want a different component, so that they'll be familiar with it as they're looking. And that's going to occur next week. And we've had great response from the local lodging properties in terms of their interest in seeing how that space could potentially work with them. So we are working on some of those efforts as part of our business plan.
Vice Mayor, any questions?
Well, I just wanted to comment being a member of the subcommittee on this, that we've been constantly going through what I'll call a cost-benefit analysis of everything that we can, and there's no question we'd like to upgrade. We'd like all new furniture in the community hall as well, but that's not something that we're willing to commit to at this point and risk the very positive budget condition that we're in right now for the overall project. So I think those types of enhancements, I know we basically call them bells and whistles. Love to do it, and hopefully we can in the future, but we just are limited to what we can afford, basically, and I think the staff has done a very good job of getting strong quality and appropriate material, furniture and electrical and everything else, given that we're trying to stay on a reasonable budget.
Good. Any more comments, questions? Thank you for that. Any more staff reports? Item 13, council member meeting reports and comments. Flood control, we did meet for an update. The project is on schedule and within its budget. Can't ask for more than that. Anything else? Councilmember Chilton?
LAFCO did not meet this month, and it will meet next month. NCTPA is tomorrow.
That's right.
It'll be exciting, and that's it.
Anybody else? Council reports?
I'll just mention that Town Manager, Councilmember Mueller, and I will be attending the League of California Cities General Assembly tomorrow through Friday in San Jose, and we'll bring back hopefully a wealth of knowledge.
Great.
We've already prepared staff for that onslaught.
Well. Anything else? Comments? What is this, the 15th? We won't have another meeting before the 6th. So I'd just like to remind everybody of the Yountville Days Parade and Festival weekend, starting on October 2nd with movie night, outdoor movie. I believe they've selected a movie. Should be a lot of fun. Starts at dusk. There will be refreshments available. The 3rd is the second annual Yountville Chili Cook-Off. And the 4th, the Yountville Days Parade and Festival. And just for your information, the parade will start 1 hour earlier this year at 11 a.m. So I've been getting a lot of phone calls from businesses and other citizens regarding that. So it will start at 11 a.m. That's so we can get the whole parade across the tracks before the wine train gets here. So make a note of that. We don't want you to miss the parade. Anything else? Councilmember Dutton, did you have something?
Just a side note, and I did cover Town Manager Rogers. I did notice this past weekend inordinate amount of signs posted around at garage sales, this kind of thing going on, and hopefully we'll be able to do something about it. I know it's a very tacky-looking situation, and I think it should be addressed.
We did discuss that in some detail today at our management team meeting in terms of one ability when staff sees certain things that are inappropriate, such as signs, to be more directive on removal. And we're also going to be developing what we're going to, you've heard our staff refer to it as the binder project, but we're also going to be putting together some outlines of what we would like our sheriff's department to do on some of these areas, that when they see certain things on the weekend, when we have limited staff on site, that they can be more proactive, because the particular situation you were addressing, I think, is much more egregious than what normally would be accepted for posting of a garage sale. Complete turn-by-turn, every 50 feet signs from the off-ramp to the location of the garage sale is I don't think that's been the normal, and we certainly don't want to say that somebody can't put up the garage sale sign in front of their house or perhaps at the corner, but this particular family was very well, I have to give them organizational skill credit and artistic credit, but they were certainly putting things that are not appropriate, and we would not allow businesses to do that. And I think Councilmember Dutton's concern is very valid, because we want to nip something in the bud before other people go, well, they did that, so I'm going to do that. And I do want to stress that that type of signage where you're putting things in and posting things and putting them on corners, blocking potential site corridors at intersections for motorists, things like that, and also just putting them in your friends and neighbors and businesses' landscape areas, not necessarily appreciated by those folks. So, and it's not, the public right-of-way is not there for the posting of general things like that. So we are definitely working on that.
If I could just follow up on that, what I would like to say is I think the real estate industry has complied admirably to staff's guidance. I know that was a big problem for a period of time, and I just want to commend them because this is a personal, individual residents that have been the most egregious lately, and I just wanted to mention that it isn't the same problem that we had been having with the real estate sign, so just wanted to make that distinction.
We appreciate that, but I will also stress that on a lot of these issues, it's always going to be a matter of communication and outreach because there's new realtors, new people, and we just have to remind ourselves that. And I think what happens is sometimes we're used to it, but there's new players, new people, and we have to be polite and remind them of what the expectations are and what the rules are and what the consequences are. So from staff's perspective, that's something we need to put into our thinking cap to make sure that we're doing that on a regular basis so that we're out there making sure. And we're also going to be adding a little bit more discussion to one of the future planning tool bag items, which was miscellaneous signage. And I think we're going to try and bring back some ideas for you for discussion to get some feedback on some broader ranges of topics of signs, including A-frames, the little open signs, directional signage, what we might want to permit, and things like that. So Bob will be working on some ideas, and you may get some 1, 2, 3 and A, B, C ideas, so that there may be some things for you to pick and choose. What ideas do you like? What excites you, and what oppositely what no we don't want that. Those are all good. So when you see some ideas, don't necessarily get all excited because staff's going to probably give you a range of them and say what kind of a pick and choose menu to get your juices flowing in terms of some ideas. But I think Bob's indicated that may be one of the next topic areas that he's going to be working on for the progress as we go through, consistent with some of the priorities. But I do appreciate the council's feedback. That's very helpful to staff.
Any more comments? Reports? Updates? Okay, item 14, future agenda items, Festival of Lights special event and amplified noise permits, introduction of community center operations and marketing plan. With that, we will adjourn to closed session. If there is anyone wishing to comment on the topic for closed session, which is